Good evening and welcome to Alan's Italy. I'm doing the show tonight with a bit of a heavy heart because of the terrible tragedy that occurred with the storm that we had recently. Um, there are people, of course, who died in the storm and lost homes, and many people are still without power. So it's very hard, and my condolences go out to those people who lost family and friends, loved ones, and people who lost their homes. And it's just a very sad occurrence, and it's just happening too often, as far as I'm concerned. So this is the second storm in a little over 2 years we've had to deal with. Some people up here, in fact, are still without power, so our hearts go out to them and our thoughts. Um, Sorry about last week. Last week we had some technical difficulties. My computer was not functioning this time, and I had to uh, bring it into the store to Best Buy to get it all straightened out, but it's now okay. Um, that's the bad news. The good news is we have a flamenco dancer in the community center right next to us tonight, so we're going to get some great Spanish music, and who knows, I might be whistling to it myself. Who knows about that? But um, anyway, tonight's show, let's go to that without much further ado. Let me get it into the correct mode here. All right, this is the show. It's um, Italy in their own words. You may remember that we did a show like this many months ago when I did interviews with people in Italy, and we brought it back and we did 4 of those interviews on the show. This is another show that I conceived of way back a few months ago, and my idea was to actually have people who are not from Italy but from the United States, from around here, who are friends and family, who have very interesting stories to tell about their experiences traveling around Italy. And that's what tonight's show is going to be on. So that's what we're going to focus on. First, a few things, a few little bits of information. Congratulations to my stepdaughter Lily and her husband Andrew on the birth of Oscar Alfred Leland. Also, congratulations to all of his grandparents, especially my wife Laura Gerton. Um, Oscar is very lucky because he will have 8 grandparents. So that's pretty amazing. And he's quite adorable. That's him moments after he was born. Um, this is in relation to that first book that I wrote, Birth of a Television Show. And I indicate that I would, like you to support public access television by understanding that if you buy the book, all proceeds from the sale of the book will go towards Woodstock Public Access Television. And for more information, go to exlibris.com. You can call that number at the bottom, or you could also get the book on Amazon. And I hope you enjoy the book. And if whether you do or you don't, all the proceeds will go towards the township. And I've already spoken with the town supervisor, Jeremy Wilbur, and we've designed a method of doing that, but it will not take effect till the first royalty checks start coming in. Hopefully that'll be a substantial amount that will go towards helping the studio. Okay, so that's really nice. I'd like to point out that yesterday was the 500th anniversary of the Sistine Chapel. I found this information out when I went to my class at Bard College that I audit every Tuesday and Thursday, and she mentioned that it is the 500th anniversary. The Sistine Chapel, was painted by Michelangelo between 1508 and 1512, and it was revealed to the public on November 1st, 1512, and yesterday was the 500th anniversary. So that is pretty amazing, and that's what, of course, it looks like. Now, one of the things from the last show, we need a little cleaning from the last show. We did a show in which we focused on Milan, and one of the places we focused on was La Scala Opera House, and I mentioned that, and let me make this larger. This is a scene from the opera Tosca that I mentioned was penned by this fellow right here. I wasn't sure because I'm not an opera buff, but this is Puccini, and he was the one who indeed was the author of Tosca, which I was the only opera I've ever seen in person at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York. He, of course, was born in Lucca, and we stayed in a hotel in Lucca that was just down the street from where he was born. In fact, the hotel is named after him. The hotel is called the Hotel Piccolo Puccini. Okay, so that's one bit of information. The Castello Sforzesco, in the on the grounds of the Castello were these sculptures. And, you know, they were very beautiful sculptures that Laura and I had seen many years ago when we took a trip to Milan. And I couldn't tell you who the artist was, the sculptor. And I did some research, and Laura helped me to realize that the sculptor is a fellow named Matthew Spender. And Matthew was born in London, studied modern history at Oxford College, studied art at the Slade School in England, moved to Italy in 1968, and lives near the town of Carrara, which is just to the south of an area that we've spent a little bit of time on this show, Cinque Terre, also in an area just north of the area of northwestern Tuscany that we also spoke about. So this is the artist, Matthew Spender, and his art is quite amazing. Tonight's show, Alan's Italy, show number 40. Italy in their own words. There are the 5 people that I will be highlighting. Some of these people you may know as Woodstock residents, except maybe the first one is, the first one, these are the 5 people, and I'll talk about them each individually as we go along, but let's start with this person. This is my daughter, Jennifer. She and her family came to visit us in Woodstock a while ago. On the left is her husband, Robert. That's Jennifer. And then my darling little granddaughter, Sophia, who's 6 years old, and me on the village green having our picture taken. And Jennifer is a lawyer, as is Rob, and they live in Dix Hills. And they, of course, are currently without power. So that's a major concern on our part. I'm very worried about them. But anyway, Jennifer and I and my first wife, Wendy, took a trip to Italy in 1992. And we had a wonderful time. And I did it, my very first interview that I did of any of these people took place in my den with Jennifer as the subject, and this is the interview I did with Jennifer. I am holding the camera, so I didn't have Laura to do this, but Ellen, here we go. Okay, so I'm here with Jennifer Howard, who is also my daughter. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
And Jennifer and I and also my ex-wife will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of our first trip to Italy coming up very soon. And I thought I would ask you some questions about that first trip.
Okay.
So it's been 20 years, but was there anything like really memorable about that trip that really sticks in your mind?
Oh, yes. Many things stick out in my mind, but I'll give you the first 3 that pop into my head. The first was the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo. I remember sitting in there with my parents, Alan and Wendy, and just staring up at the ceiling in awe and not believing that I was actually there. It's very magical and spiritual and enlightening. It's an amazing feeling to actually be in there staring at the ceiling. It's an amazing feat, and it's amazing that a human being was able to do this on his back for such a long time.
Right, alone.
The second thing that pops into my head is the gondola ride that we took in Venice with another family who we met randomly. I forgot where we met them, but we met another family and decided to share a gondola ride with them because I remember it being a little bit pricey, so that's a good tip. You could always share the gondola ride with other people.
Right.
But I remember it to be also a very memorable experience, and you feel like you can't believe you're actually in a gondola because it's something you see on TV or read stories about. It's a very romantic experience, even if you're with just your mom and dad, it's still a very romantic experience. The third thing that pops into my head is Florence.
What about Florence?
The Renaissance. The Renaissance is still in the air in Florence. You still feel as though the Renaissance is taking place. It never really left the city, so it's like you're living in history, and it's one of the few places in the world where I believe you get that feeling as if you were living in history.
Now, is there anything in particular in Florence that gave you that feeling?
I remember one evening walking back from dinner, and I was with my parents, and my father pointed out Dante's house, and I remember looking up at the house and getting a very eerie feeling, almost like he was looking down on us and writing, still writing up in that house. It was a really, really eerie, not scary, but just...
You sort of felt like he was there and you were living history with him kind of standing next to you. That's how I felt.
Correct. He was looking down on us, and he was still writing, and the juices were still flowing. You feel like the Renaissance is still there, and all these figures, these intellectual, historical, and talented people from the 16th century?
Well, actually, the Italian Renaissance really dates from the beginning of the 15th century. So when you're talking about Dante, you're actually talking about a little before that. But certainly, you know, his works of his writing was a precursor to the Renaissance.
Okay.
Now, I was going to mention that because I remember that night that we came back to the hotel. We were both up all night because we just couldn't get Dante out of our minds.
Right.
That was really something.
You still felt like these people were walking through the streets, like their ghosts were still there.
Right.
I also enjoyed seeing David, of course, and the Uffizi.
Right, we did all that. That's right.
And the shopping in Florence is unreal. I had to throw that in.
Right. Okay.
Nice leather belt and leather jacket.
Now, do you have any recollection of the restaurants at all? Do any of the restaurants during that 2-week period kind of stand out in your mind?
I remember one restaurant in Florence standing out. I remember we asked for ice, and they had to go across an alleyway to get ice.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I found that to be quite amusing.
You know what the name of that restaurant was?
No. Federici's?
No, but I've eaten there many times subsequently. The name of the restaurant is Alfredo's.
Oh, Alfredo's.
On Via dei Neri.
Sorry. I remember a restaurant in Venice we ate at that we enjoyed that was outside. I don't remember the name.
I remember that. I don't remember the name either. I might be able to find it, though, but I don't remember the restaurant exactly. That's what I was thinking of, Alfredo's restaurant, and how shocking it was that if you asked for ice, they couldn't just, open a refrigerator. They actually had to go
across an alley.
Yes, that was very, very interesting. Do you remember that beautiful hotel?
In Florence.
Yes.
Yes.
And
I don't remember the name, but I remember thinking that that was a very nice hotel, and the nicer of the hotels that we stayed during that trip.
Do you remember what was special about that hotel room? You had your own little alcove to sleep in.
I had an alcove.
It was a triple room, and you had your own little alcove to sleep in. And they, in really beautiful hotels, it's not just like throwing in an extra bed. They usually have a separate room for triples, and actually a separate room for singles as well. I stayed in a few single rooms when I went alone. So, If you had to go, if you wanted, if somebody said to you, Jennifer, I'd like you to go back to Italy, and I will pay for your trip, what place would you select of the places that you were at?
Well, out of the places I was at, it's a it's a tie between Florence and Venice, but I would probably pick Florence.
Very interesting. Okay, well that's,
Rome, I liked, but I wouldn't run to go back.
right. But did you like Rome?
I liked it, and I would go back, but it's not my first choice.
Right. Well, Venice and Florence are two of my favorites, but if I had to go back, I think I'd also pick Florence. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. And
Thank you for having me.
on behalf of Alan's Italy, I'd like to thank you for me, and thank you also for my audience, who is probably enjoying this as well. So,
Buonasera.
buonasera. Okay, so that was interview number 1. Oh, this is the next one is Ed, not Bonnie. I'm sorry. Okay, well, the next one is my friend Ed. Ed is one of my closest friends. Ed has had a very interesting life. He lives up here now and part of the time in the city as well. Ed was a Marine. He was a member of the Marine Corps. He was during the Vietnam era. He didn't actually go to Vietnam, thank goodness, but he also worked for General Foods, Bristol Myers. He was involved in his later career in the concept of executive search, excuse me, and owned his own business. And Ed is now retired, and one of my really good friends, and he consented to do this interview that we are about to show you right about now. So once again, Ellen, here we go. Well, welcome to Alan's Italy, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure to be here, Alan.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. So you've been to Italy,
Yes.
and where were you?
Among the cities, I've been to Florence and Rome. In terms of countryside, Lake Maggiore and the Amalfi Coast, and then the hill towns of Umbria and Tuscany. I think Assisi, Lucca, Perugia,
Wow.
Pizza.
So which of those little hill towns did you kind of?
Assisi.
Why did you like Assisi?
The cathedral, just awesome. And also, I think it's a smaller town. It's not really a city. And walking those streets was just great. And the cobblestones and the old buildings and the Italian women on the balconies just hanging out. It's kind of like, other than the stores, I don't think it's any different as everyone knows than when it was in the 1500s.
When you were in Assisi, did you feel the presence of Saint Francis? Like, was that like on your mind that he was from Assisi?
No.
No. Saint Francis did not enter
Saint
your mind
Francis of
at all.
Assisi, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
But that's why
No.
Assisi gained its popularity, because it was where Francis,
Right.
before he was a saint,
Right.
practiced his thing. So.
Right. But I love Italian cathedrals with the frescoes. I love all the cathedrals.
Do you have a favorite cathedral that you like very much?
In Italy, probably Assisi, I would think.
I love the cathedral at Assisi also. It's beautiful. And do you remember the Giotto paintings there, or any
Vaguely.
aspect of it?
Vaguely.
Yeah,
Vaguely.
it's a beautiful.
But I'm not very versed on the old art of Italy, other than Michelangelo. I'm not really that versed on him either. But,
Right.
But just in terms of...
So of the small towns, you liked Assisi.
Assisi, San Gimignano, that's another one I
Ah.
loved. I think it's got the 12 towers that surround it.
Very good. Yeah.
And then we couldn't get into Siena, that's where the Palio is.
Yeah.
Because the Palio was running.
Oh, really?
And we couldn't get a reservation.
So you went in either mid-July or mid-August then?
The hill towns were August, unfortunately. It was very hot.
Oh, yeah. But it was cooler in the hill towns than it
Cooler in the hill
was
towns.
in the cities.
Right, but Rome was oppressive.
Rome was oppressive in July and August. It's horrible.
Right.
So, what stands in your mind about Rome?
Oh my God, just I was awestruck when I first saw the Colosseum. I mean, I've seen it in movies, and it just, we're such a young country, America, 400 years old, and to go and see this where the gladiators gladiated 2,000 years ago and it's still standing was amazing. Just amazing. And to picture, I guess any place you see Roman ruins, but particularly the Colosseum, that was amazing. And the Pantheon and the Roman Forum. So just the oldness of it, and the fact that even the apartment buildings, well, the buildings are still standing, and they're probably 500-600 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. You don't get that to that extent in Florence. You know, Florence is more of a Renaissance town,
Yes.
and Rome. You know, well, Rome has different layers. Rome is like, you know, really a town of layers. And if you want to study ancient history from, like, you know, the Etruscans really all the way up to the
Right.
present, you go to Rome because it's all there.
Right. Florence, you kind of feel you're in the 1500s. I guess there are things that are older, but
Did you feel that walking around the towns, the streets of Florence, that you were kind of walking in the 15th century?
well, 1500s. Yeah. Well, what I did was before going to Florence, I read The Agony and the Ecstasy, which is Michelangelo's
Yeah, I know.
biography, and that was really, I'm not going to say amazing, but interesting to look at a street and say, I just read that in the book, and it was the same street, it's the same name, and to feel that, you know, it's still 1500s in some respects.
Many of the streets in Florence have the same names that they had, you know, in the 1500s.
Right.
So some of them are different, but you know, they kept some of the streets the same. You could actually go to the same buildings and the same, you know, it's like really quite amazing. That's why I love going to Italy myself. So, you know, so if you had a chance to go back, if somebody said to you, go back to Italy, and you have one place you could go to, what place would you decide?
If I could go back, or someone asked me?
Somebody said, I'm going
I'd
to give
say
you
Rome, yeah.
$5,000
You have to see
and...
Rome.
Right.
See Rome, and then I'd say the Amalfi Coast, in terms of a non-city, just for pure beauty.
You could have a pretty nice trip just going to those two places.
Well, that's the last time we went. We just did Rome and the Amalfi Coast. We had never been to the Amalfi Coast.
I'll tell you, you know, when you talk about Rome, I can't help it, but I always think of that story that you tell of getting lost in Rome, driving around.
Oh, trying to get out of Rome.
Remember that?
2 hours. We couldn't get out of we kept going around and around, and actually we crossed the bridge. But what was so frustrating was when you got out of the main part of Rome, no one spoke English. So I'm trying to get by on Spanish if I could, but it didn't help me. Finally, we ran into an English woman who spoke perfect Italian, but in terms of directing us, she got us onto I guess it's called the motorway.
Right.
Then we were driving from there south down past Naples to the Amalfi Coast. So
Right.
yeah, that was a harrowing experience.
I always think of that. You know, we were there in 2010, and we rented the car as far towards the end of the town as possible. So as soon as we rented the car, we kind of got on the autostrada.
That's where we rented from. It was
Really?
supposedly half a mile from the motorway. And we missed one turn.
God, I would give anything if you could tell me the name of the street. I'm not even sure I remember the name of the street, so I have no idea. You know.
The only other car advice I'd give to anyone who's going there is, if you
Don't do it.
If you're going to the Amalfi Coast, get an automatic. Don't drive a stick if you can help it, because that is the most white knuckle, harrowing driving I've ever done in my life. I mean, places where you have to stop the car so the car coming towards you can pass, and everyone.
You had that experience?
Absolutely. I actually hit.
You had to back up?
I backed up, and it was kind of a curve, so it's hard to back because the rear wheels don't turn. So I actually scraped the side of the car, telling the guy in front of me to get out, and said, "Let me help you. Let me do it."
Oh, yeah, I remember that story where somebody actually moved the car for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's how that could be a harrowing experience.
Also, the macho Italian men on their motorcycles are right on top of you, and they're passing you on blind curves. So that gets you hot going also.
I know. Well,
but it's worth it to go to the Amalfi Coast.
good. Okay, you've just designed a very nice little, a future show will be just roaming the Amalfi Coast. So, Ed, thank you very much for your
My
time.
pleasure,
I
Alan.
appreciate it
Glad
very
to help.
much. Welcome to, thank you
Alan's
for
Italy.
doing this for Alan Zindley, yes.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, so back to me now. All right, so that was my friend Ed, and this next person is Bonnie. Bonnie is a neighbor of mine, where I live in Woodstock. Bonnie was founder and executive director of the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. In fact, Governor Pataki named an award after her that is given to people. After she left that job, she became a guidance counselor in Wallkill, New York, which is south of here. And Bonnie is a really, really wonderful person. And she has a story as well to tell about her experiences. And here it comes. So, Ellen, once again, when you're ready.
Okay, so here we are, Alan Zindley, another interview. This time we're interviewing Bonnie Wagner, who lives across the road from us, and she's a wonderful person. And you've been to Italy, and I'm going to ask Bonnie. She's been to many, many places. Tell us where you've been, first of all.
I've been to Greece, Italy, Thailand.
In Italy, where have you been?
In Italy, I was in Rome, Florence, Tuscany, the small towns there, Naples, the Amalfi Coast, Pompeii, and Cinque Terre.
Okay. That's a pretty good. Was that one trip or several trips?
It was one trip, but I was there for close to a month.
That is amazing. That's wonderful. Okay, so what was your favorite place?
My favorite place was Cinque Terre.
Okay, could you tell us why?
Well, it combined all the things that I love to do. It had absolutely extraordinary views, beautiful, colorful, old towns, and I love walking. And so we walked from the first town, which I can't remember.
Rio Maggiore.
Right, all the way to the end. And it was up and
Wow.
down these steps, going into cafes along the way, beautiful views of the water. It was absolutely spectacular, and I loved it.
Right. So that's quite a walk. I'll tell you right now that walking from Rio Maggiore to Manarola, which is the first two towns, is, not a difficult walk, but the rest of it is. So that's pretty amazing. And Cornelia was the one on, the one very high up.
Right.
So that was pretty amazing.
It was amazing, and it was worth the effort, because you stopped along the way and sat down and looked at the beautiful views.
Right. Did you do all those 5 towns in one day?
Yep.
So you must have started very early.
Not that early, like maybe 9, 10, something like
Right.
that. And then we took the ferry back.
Okay, back to where? Where did you start from?
I'm
sorry.
I don't remember.
Was it one of the 5 towns?
Yes.
It was. So
Yes.
maybe you went back to the original town, Rio Maggiore?
I don't think that was the place that
Okay.
was the place that
Okay.
we stayed in, but we stayed in a hotel where you had to walk up a huge staircase because it was on the top of the mountain.
Okay, so you stayed in one of the 5 towns,
Yeah.
and then when you got to the end, you just simply took the ferry back to where you started from.
Yeah, but it was an all-day affair.
Right. Okay. And okay, so that was Cinque Terre is your favorite place,
I
and
loved it.
that's certainly one of my favorite places, although I've only been there once. So what would you say is your second favorite?
Well, it was amazing to visit places that I had read about, like the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel. I mean, that was beyond amazing. And then seeing the statue of David, after seeing replicas over the years, it was like, oh, I can't believe this is me actually doing this. It was amazing. And, of course, I loved the food.
Right, the food. Yeah, when I went to Rome, the first place I went was Rome back in 1992, and I remember we took a taxi right past the Roman Forum, and the Palatine Hill is the hill on top, you know, and I saw the ruins up there, and it just, you know, just it blows you away. Now, when you were in Tuscany, do you remember any of the little towns that you visited?
Montepulciano, which I loved. We stayed in, I believe it's called San Federico, which was a monastery that they converted into a hotel. That was magnificent, with a wonderful restaurant and beautiful views.
Right, yes. That's San Quirico di Orcia,
That was
and that's in that area of Montepulciano.
Yeah.
So if now you've been all over the world, so I mean not all over the world, but you've been to Thailand and Greece and all of that. So would you put Italy like high on the list? I mean, in other words, if you could go back right now, someplace where you've been, where would you choose to go?
Well, I'd like to go to Venice because I didn't get to go there on the first trip. It was the summer. I thought it would be too hot and that it wouldn't be nice. So now I would like to go in the spring when the weather would be more temperate to enjoy that. I'd also like to go to Lake Como. My parents used to go there all the time. They loved it.
Really?
So when I go there, I feel like an affinity to my parents.
Right. So that would be really wonderful. Well, Bonnie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure. And
And that's that. Okay. Okay, the next person we will be interviewing, seeing the interview of, the interview already took place, is our friend Barbara. Barbara is one of our closest friends. Her career was as a teacher of photography, a teacher of art at Edward R. Murrow High School in Brooklyn. This is where Laura met her during the time that Laura was a teacher at Edward R. Murrow and also the supervisor of the department. And Barbara is now retired and does volunteer work in Woodstock, and also is an artist of great note. She's a really wonderful artist, and I love her work. And here is the interview that I did of Barbara many months ago. Once again.
welcome to Alan's Italy. I'd like to welcome my friend Barbara Velasquez to Alan's Italy. Barbara has consented to come on and talk about an experience that she had. Barbara met this woman, Margaret Krug, who teaches at the New School, and this is the book that she wrote. And I'd like Barbara to tell us her experience. So.
Well, I was art teacher at Edward R. Murrow High School, and I came to meet Margaret Krug multiple times. She was at several parties from a colleague, and then when I scheduled a trip with my students to the Whitney, she took students around to look at exhibits at the Whitney. Margaret is very exciting. She's just great hair. She's a beautiful, artistic lady. And a friend of mine had taken the course, and so I thought, wow, I'll get to go to Tuscany, you know. So I flew on my own to Florence and did this whole independent thing with the bus, riding around
Right.
and stopping at these little places and getting a little drink and getting back on the bus, and ended up near Siena in this sort of secluded, magnificent old Tuscan estate. And this place is some sort of a, I don't know what you call it. It's a farm. It's organic. They have all kinds of interns there and programs in the summer. Music.
Is it called an agriturismo, by any chance?
I don't
Is that what it's
know.
called?
Maybe.
Okay, good.
Maybe. But they have like Tuscan pigs and all these
Yeah.
wonderful original vegetables, and they have a restaurant there. But the students that come there get like Italian lessons. You eat every night with this cook that gives these cooking lessons,
Oh
and
my
we had
goodness,
panna
sounds
cotta.
good.
She gave us lessons in how to make some of the things that we were eating, which was And then we would work in this beautiful barn, this stone barn, and at the end we had this exhibit, and there were some 5 odd pieces of each student hanging on the walls. It was just gorgeous. The rooms where you stayed were, they had no screens, but there were these tall rooms with these old antique beds, and the colors of the were all original with stone floors. I mean, I think this building was probably 1200, so they keep it up
Right.
because it's, you know, a nonprofit.
Right.
So it was totally great. We went to all of these various locations around Siena to look at artwork that was representative of the techniques, the Renaissance techniques she was teaching to us. And it was all done with these original pigments. So we would stop and grind the stuff into them. And we worked from reproductions, which was not my favorite thing, but the reality is they came out great. And the idea was if you learn the technique, then you could do like, you know, sketches and come up with some kind of sample of your own. So I
Did you
thought,
did you do any landscapes of the Tuscan land? You know,
I took-
Tuscan scenery.
I only did photographs. I actually, this,
But you took did you take a lot of photographs
I took
of
a lot
Tuscan
of-
scenery?
yeah. I mean, the piece that I
I
sold
want
at
to show.
Lamb
Can I show
today
this?
is from there.
Okay,
yeah.
explain this piece to the audience.
Well, I don't remember exactly what the reproduction is of, but it's an encaustic technique. And so encaustic.
Well, this is a Roman, you know, this is a Roman woman from ancient
portraits,
Rome,
Yeah.
and that's the technique they used in ancient Rome,
Typical.
encaustic. So that's what this is. This reminds me of something you'd see at the Met, some of those.
Right.
It came out great. I was very happy with it.
So that's really beautiful.
This,
So,
this one here is this is underpainting, and you started off with rabbit skin glue surface, and you know these things were all put outside on the porch, and beautiful landscape. And then we would go into the studio, and this is oil, and this piece ended up in her book, which is here. And then I started to do a little sketch, which I never really finished, on my own, which is a pot, a large pot that was in the garden, and you could see how you use the darker colors underneath and drop the highlights on top.
it looks like the capital of a Corinthian, you know, Corinthian. Is that possible?
I don't
You know,
know.
that Corinthian shape on the top of a Roman column.
Well, maybe it was an idea,
I'm just trying to connect it to Italy.
but the place is just gorgeous. It's
Yeah.
all originally, you know.
Have you ever had the
restored.
desire to return and do some
Yes,
another
I
program
have.
like
I
that?
actually, when my daughter moved to Williamsburg, I actually met a teacher a professor who went there and rented one of their houses, and he did that in the summer. So he was a painter who actually lived on the estate and would come into, you know, the dining room for meals because their meals are unbelievable. But I thought, you know, if I were to go back, maybe I would want to do more independent artwork on my own, and one way to do that would be to rent one of their small you know, these little old houses that were on the estate, and then be able to, of course, return to the dining room
Of course.
and the nightly wine fests on the porch.
What
which
was
is-
your favorite food in Tuscany?
Oh, I don't remember. Everything was delicious, but
Yeah, I agree.
they made chocolate rolls. I mean, I'm thinking of the sweets.
Yeah.
And panna cotta, which I'm a vanilla girl. I love
Right.
panna cotta.
Oh, are you? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Okay, so that's Barbara. And the next one, and the next and last one, I've saved for last. This is a long one. This is Leonard. Leonard, and I'm going to, Leonard was a member of the Woodstock Artists Association Board of Directors and was in fact its president for 6 years, the president of the Board of Directors. He has since stepped down. And when he applied for the job, you know, it's an elected position and people vote, and his resume, I'm reading right from his resume now. He developed product designs, package designs, corporate identity, and large-scale exhibition projects, specializing in museums and world fairs. And he's worked in Canada, Australia, and Spain. He is the person who helps to design World's Fairs. In fact, one of my favorite World's Fairs was the one in Montreal in 1967, which he had a hand in creating. Leonard is a great storyteller. He's a great lecturer. He has given lectures around town, around the town of Woodstock, on many of his projects and how he puts them together. And it's an absolutely fascinating thing to listen to. And Leonard invited us to his home, and this is where the interview takes place. It takes place in his home. It is a bit long. It's about 13 minutes, which is the longest of the 5 interviews. But I found it to be a very, very fascinating story. And here it is, coming up right now. So, Ellen.
Okay, so Leonard, welcome to Alan's Italy.
It's a pleasure to be here. I just wish I was in Italy instead of here.
Well, if we had this interview 5 days from now, you'd be in Italy with me.
Oh, thank you.
So you could come along.
You
He's
have
a nice
my
cute
ticket
cat.
ready?
This cat is like really
You
cute.
have my ticket?
No, but I could easily get it. I keep spending more and more money on this trip, so it's just going higher and higher. What's another $1,200? Anyway, so you have an Italy experience that
Yes,
you're going
I
to
do.
be talking
Yes,
about.
I
So go right ahead.
As I'm known here in Woodstock as being married to Sylvia Leonard Wolfe, but up until 1996, I was married to a European lady who was born in Hungary during World War II and lived in Europe in 4 different countries. And she had a great skill with languages, spoke 6 languages, Italian rather, being one of them. So wherever we traveled in Europe, we were able to communicate with the people and the places, and we never had to worry about hotels or travel or anything.
I'm taking you with me next week.
Yeah, anyway, it was very nice. Anyway, I met her in Montreal. She had moved to Canada, and that's where I met her. And I met her through an Italian family that lived there. He had a tile company, and he sold in Canada and manufactured in Italy. So since he helped introduce us, and after we got married, his wedding gift was a trip to his family estate in Italy, which was on the Italian Riviera, which is in the northwestern portion of Italy, between Genoa and Nice.
It was between Genoa and Nice, so it
That's
was very close to the French border.
Very close to the
Near
French
Ventimiglia.
border. Yes, right. And so to get there, you fly to Milan, and then we took a train down to Genoa, switched trains, and then went down along the coast. It's there's a rail train there that goes. It's called the Genoa Ventimiglia rail system. Anyway, the home was in Albenga. Albenga is an ancient city. In the first millennium, it was a very important place, but it deteriorated after that, and it's a small agricultural town now. It mainly has a lot of schools, university, and several schools. It's got some cathedrals, and mainly agricultural in nature. The family that I was visiting was the name of Della Valle, and I was going to stay at his father's home. He was still alive, and he was called Engineer della Valle. You called him, you didn't call him by his first name, you called him by engineer. Anyway, we arrived in Albenga.
That engineer meaning
He was an engineer.
he was an engineer.
He was
wasn't-
an engineer.
He didn't
But
drive
he
a train.
was a very significant engineer
Right.
because he was the engineer who developed the highway system and the tunneling through the Dolomites.
Really?
And so he was quite famous at the time, quite well known. When we went there, I discovered that he was 101 years of age, and his wife was 93.
Wow.
And this was the house where we were going to stay. We were met at the railroad station in this Mercedes car, big limousine, and by his chauffeur, Peppino, and with the leather cap and the
Do
livery.
you remember the name of the chauffeur?
I remember the name of the chauffeur because he was very interesting. And he drove us up to this huge home, which the only way I can describe it was a small castle. I mean,
Right.
it had turrets, it was all stone.
Right.
It had a giant wooden door that squeaked when you opened it, you know.
And Laura would have photographed
If there
that
weren't
door.
flowers and sunlight and I knew it was Italy, I'd swear, if there was fog and mist, I'd swear I was in Transylvania, you know. So we walk into the house and we're taken up to our room, which had a 20-foot cathedral ceiling and giant cathedral windows. And it had a bathroom that had a couch and another chair and a small table, along with a bathtub, sink, and toilet. So it was pretty regal in feeling. All the floors were stone. Nothing was concrete. It was all stone, big blocks of stone. The house had Latin statements and plaques all over the house, fitted
From
into
ancient
the stone.
times.
I don't know what it was. I couldn't figure out what they were. My wife didn't speak Latin. She spoke other languages, but she didn't speak Latin. And some of them she could sort of figure out, but it wasn't too clear. But they were all over this house. Anyway, it was dinner time, so we had to go down for dinner. And there were two guests there. First of all, I was introduced to the engineer. He took one look at me. He was 5'6". He took one look at me and he gave me a nickname. He nicknamed me Man and a Half. That was my name. He didn't
That's a
address
good
me
one.
as Leonard. He addressed me as Man and a Half.
Well, you know what this means, don't you?
Yes.
This is, you know, this is my audience is Woodstock. Everybody's going to call you Man and a Half.
Man and a
when
Half.
they're-
No, well, okay. I'll give him permission. Anyway, there were two guests for dinner, and they had this. The dining room had like a 12-foot stone table, and seated was able to seat 14. And so he sat at one end, and she sat at the other end, and he seated my bride at the time right next to him. And he was maybe 101 years old, but he had enough piss and vinegar in him. I could figure out that he was going after my wife.
Oh, wow.
He
Really?
was, yeah, because his wife at the end of the table
93.
was going like this. Anyway, the two guests, I didn't quite catch the name at first, so my wife sort of indicated to me that they were pretty special. So I said, well, who are these two people? Turned out it was Andrea Doria,
Really?
the family.
The family of the famous?
family of the boat, yes.
The cruise line that
The
went
cru-
down.
That's right.
Oh my
The
goodness
Andrea
gracious.
Doria.
You're kidding.
Yes.
This was the story? If this was the I would have put you on the first show.
No. Anyway, this kind
Oh,
of
my
floored me
goodness.
too. You know, he was a very distinguished gentleman. His wife was quite lovely and very, very elegant. Anyway, nobody paid any attention to me throughout the meal because I didn't speak Italian, you know, and
I know that feeling.
I was this young groom, you know, kind of wide-eyed at all this. And at the end of the meal, he set a bowl of fresh figs. I mean, this was an estate. They grew everything, vineyards and animals and fig trees and the whole works. So they had a bowl of fresh figs, not dried figs, fresh figs, you know, the round green ones. And he put the bowl in front of me. And then his waiter brought up a bottle of liqueur. It was some kind of grava. It was pure black. It was like aquavit with a punch. Aquavit's pretty tough. So
I
you can
never
make-
had aquavit.
This was pure black, and they put it in
Like
like
licorice or
a
something?
little thimble drink, you know? So he said, what you do is you bite on the fig, take a chunk of the fig, and then you take a shot of this black stuff, okay, with it. So I did that, and, you know, tears are running down my my cheeks. But I wasn't going to let this guy put me down in front of my
Put you down.
my new bride.
He was trying to put you to sleep so he could.
Exactly.
Okay.
So after the third one, I was, hey, Andrea, how the hell are you?
How'd that ship go down?
Yeah,
Tell me
what
about
you do? You sink it?
it. For the insurance money.
No. Anyway, so we went up to our bedroom afterwards, and
Just
I-
you two, not the.
just no,
not the
he
one
didn't
you're-
follow us. No, we went up to the bedroom, and we got into the bedroom, and I noticed that in the ceiling there was a large cobweb, and there was a strand coming down all the way to just above the pillow, and there was a spider dangling there right over my pillow. This was to be our bridal bed. You get that?
Oh my goodness.
So I go to grab my trusty Time magazine. I'm going to swap the damn thing, right? But my wife says, oh, we're in Italy now, you know, you can't do that. And she goes and she tweaks the thing, and the spider goes all the way up to the ceiling. So now I'm in my bridal bed, the nuptial bed, and I got this spider up there, and I don't know what the hell he's up to.
Did you switch positions and put?
Well,
you put the pet pillow in
No,
the
but I
side?
had one eye on the ceiling. Anyway,
That's a great story. Is there more to this?
there's a little more.
Oh my gosh.
The next morning, I was sick as a dog,
Oh yeah.
and I had to go into this bathroom. Now, the toilet was up 3 steps. It was a real throne with a water closet high up on the ceiling. You pull the chain,
Yep.
and you got to stand back because that drop of water is pretty harsh. So I'm sitting on this toilet, and with the steps in front, my feet don't hit, you know, I stick out too far, my feet are dangling there. And there are these big cathedral windows by the toilet, which I push open to get a feeling of fresh air. And there is my wife, arm in arm with the engineer, walking off into the distance.
Don't tell me that was the last time you ever saw her.
No, it wasn't that story. But I figured
That's a one.
this is what he had in mind all along.
Right. Right. Well, I mean that was it was leading up to that. You
It
know,
was
he got you
leading
pretty
up to
soused and pretty sick, and then that's great. That is a great story.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.
Okay, back to me. Okay, that was Leonard's. And of course, I'd like to thank Jennifer, Ed, Bonnie, Barbara, and Leonard for their time and their wonderful stories. The next show is going to be part 2 of a show that we started a few weeks ago when we did the Museum of the Duomo with Rick Hurst. Remember, he stopped in the middle because we had too much material, so he'll be picking that up next week. I'd just like to say one last thing, and that is that I'm always looking for people to interview. So if you'd like, if you saw what it is, it's very relaxing. It's very short, except for Leonard's. It was 5 to 8 minutes each interview, And if you have a story about an experience you had in Italy, something memorable, something that you'll always think about when you think of Italy, please email me, and I'll be happy to work it out any way I can. I'll come to your house, you can come to my house, whatever, and that'll work out really well. In the meantime, thank you very, very much for watching. It was my pleasure to bring this show to you, and I wish you again buonanotte e buona fortuna.